right. Hello, everyone, and we're back at it. Welcome to episode 1 of season 9 of the Airways podcast. I'm Rohan Anand, co-founder, co-host, also with Helwing Villamizar, our amazing executive producer. And it's been a little while since we last recorded. So, Helwing, ¿cómo estás?
Todo bien. It's been, I think, almost a year, probably. I know we've been doing a lot of things at Airways. We recently launched the new Airways digital platform. So that's been great because we have been wanting to do this for a while now, especially this year. And yeah, so actually I'm taking a hiatus from the day-to-day editorial for just a short time. But I do want to say that I'm happy that we're recording.
Exactly. And I keep re-listening to old episodes more from recent seasons as opposed to previous ones, like from the way back beginnings. We're talking like June 2016 era. And the important thing is that not only does this allow us to connect, you, me, and Vinay have our banter. Vinay, thanks for joining us. You look great.
Hey, what's up, guys?
I think we also just enjoy being able to discuss and talk about aviation. And it's less about the journalism and the reporting, and it's more about the conversing about what we're seeing. And I think that in that vein, it's really important to reiterate the value and the benefit of taking breaks. I've been through so many burnouts in my life, including my side hustles, like teaching yoga, recording this podcast, writing articles, traveling to write stories about airports and airlines and CEOs and meeting deadlines. And it's a lot. And I think that feeds really nicely into our topic for today on mental health, pilots, and aviation. And it also dovetails off of prior episodes that we've had, like with Merritt Gorder, if you recall, from October 2023, the first and only female pilot in Aruba. And we are also recording this episode on the 28th of July, 2025, which is also my parents' 44th anniversary. It's wild. And aviation runs in my family and my blood. And kind of in that vein, I kind of want to dedicate this episode to my family that has played a huge role in the history of aviation in India, including female members of my family as, my grandparents' age. And doctors and engineers and lawyers are something that a lot of immigrant families aspire to have in their lives. And the skills and required trade that is necessary, requires you to push boundaries. And again, sometimes we neglect, the self-care as leaders. So Captain Rakesh Anand and Captain Yash Anand, who are both my uncle and my cousin, are both either current or former pilots for Air India, 747, 737, 707, and 8777, and Airbus 320 families. So this is a love letter to them as well. And I think that in that vein, we also want to maybe touch upon the Air India Flight 171 incident that took place on June 12th, 25. Oddly enough, and kind of eerily enough, 40 years to the month of the Air India 182 flight that was bombed over the Atlantic Ocean of 1985 by a terrorist organization. And that was a horrible tragedy that resulted in over 300 deaths. It was so sad. A lot of children were on that flight. And then the incident that went down in Ahmedabad also claimed a lot of lives, and there was one survivor miraculously. It's harrowing that the imagery that we saw of that plane going down, especially a plane that had been in the fleet for Air India for so long, took place. It's one of those wild, wacky things too, where overwater landings and ditches, kind of can happen in such a manner where there could be some means to save lives. Unfortunately, the American Airlines incident that took place earlier this year didn't have that because that was a collision. But in this case, this aircraft went down in a highly condensed, urbanized area of India, in these airports in India and Pakistan, like what happened with the PIA crash of 2020. When they go down, they take down civilians as well, like what happened. Speaking of doctors, medicine, this was a building that were housing people studying medicine. It's really no different than a plane going down in Manhattan. So with that said, there is a topic that has come out of this, and it is not a topic that we haven't talked about before, which is mental health, aviation, and pilots. And we talked about this on our episode with Merrick Gorder. We've talked about it in the capacity of some of the incidents like the German wings, one that was intentional. And now we're hearing all of this discussion about the captains and their profiles. You know, one of aviation's greatest mysteries, if not the only greatest mystery, is Malaysia Airlines, MH370, that, again, the scrutiny has come down to the pilot and the pilot intentionality. Then Egypt Air 996 that took place in November 99, which was where the captain was saying, as they intentionally shut off everything, I belong to God, praying to Allah, and then boom. So it's a very highly stigmatized topic, mental health, just in general, let alone pilots, and the fear and the sort of reason a lot of pilots will tell you that they don't feel as empowered to discuss this is because any sort of indication that they may not be fit to fly gets scrutinized. They'd be in peril of losing their careers, especially if they're in a country not like the EU or the United States, where they're, very strict and large and powerful label groups. And we're talking like some of these private airlines in, Southeast Asia or the Middle East or Africa, perhaps even Latin America, where it's way more ambiguous. And there's also kind of a brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, of pilots that work together, fly together out in the field. They're very distant and different from what is being done at corporate level. And this is all in the context of them having to live a life with or without their families, away, being in hotels and having their skills, on the job while they're flying. Yet sometimes a long flight with a long duration may feel like it's a lot of go, 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 go. And then it could be just very calm for a period. And you're sitting. And they say sitting is the new smoking. So how are you able to move around? People are talking now about the intentional engine shutoff situation. They're scrutinizing details over the pilot and their history. This is a very big and real talking point in the larger context of 2025 and airline and aviation disasters. Very curious to know what your thoughts are and reactions have been to this, especially because you, like I, are Indian American. We're dual citizens. We both have flown Air India hundreds of thousands of miles. We have family that work for Air India. I was booked on an Air India flight from Chicago to Delhi for my cousin's art show in the fall. And I have redacted that. And now I'm taking Air Canada instead, just because, and some Air India pilots themselves are even like, don't fly us. So I'm so curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, I'll probably note that I've flown on VT-A and B, like on that 787 before.
That's eerie.
Which is eerie.
Well,
I think so. There's always like kind of two sides. Like I do think that there's a pretty genuine risk factor, right, in aviation, right? And I think that the thing that's tricky, right, is that like pilots have so much dominion and so much control over aircraft at the end of the day, right? That's how our system is designed and kind of configured, that when something goes wrong, that's a place where it can go wrong, in part because regulators and airlines and aircraft manufacturers have done so much to make aircraft and air travel safer. And I think that pilot sort of well-being and pilot mental health is one of the real remaining risk factors. There's obviously others. We saw kind of with the American Airlines crash back in, was that February or January? Time is a flat circle.
It was January 30th, I believe.
January 30th, yeah. Also, eerie story. I was scheduled to fly into DCA that night.
It was a chilly, icy evening.
It was a chilly, icy evening. Though I think, again, without sort of beating a dead horse, right? I think a lot of the pain there was the absolutely absurd airspace management protocols and the kind of interplay between military aviation and commercial in the DC area. But all to say, like, I do think that like pilot mental health is a very, very real risk. But here's the thing, right? I was on a flight that was going to fly into DCA that night. And since that moment, I have taken probably another 70 commercial flights this calendar year. So part of it for me is I always sort of reason from the preponderance of the evidence. And the preponderance of the evidence still suggests, obviously, there are very real things that have to be addressed, that air travel is overwhelmingly safe. Every time I get in an Uber, every time I get behind the wheel of a car, even adjusting for all of these risk factors, I am still an order of magnitude more at risk and more in danger than I am when I get on a plane. Whether it's flown by Air India, whether it's flown even in, Nepal and some of the places that have the most dangerous kind of air travel setups in the world. So I think there's a very real conversation to be had about sort of pilot safety and pilot mental health, and to think about kind of redundant systems that can be built into aircraft to reduce this risk. But I don't think it has changed my willingness to get on a plane, if that makes sense.
Sure. I think that most people probably feel that way. Let's hone in on what you mentioned about pilot mental health and the shift from the conversations from before. And I referenced Merritt Gorder, who was on the podcast in October 2023. She was the first and only female pilot in Aruba. Check out that episode. And I raised the question of mental health, and she said, "Thank you for asking that question." And I remember just having a very, candid conversation with her, which I think she said, "Thanks for acknowledging this. We're all doing our best. I live in Aruba where it's a small, tight-knit family, and we kind of look out for each other here. That goes with the spirit of Aruba. But who's to say that's the same situation at Air Canada? They're some of the greatest aviation mysteries of Egypt Air, 990, and Malaysia Airlines, that really are attributed to a pilot deciding to go down, perhaps even thinking that it could be disguised even as a tragic accident that happened versus a intentional attempt to unalive oneself or unalive others along with them by doing something as black and white and drastic as shutting off engines. And not just what may have happened leading up to the circumstances or what may be waiting for them on the ground, more so what their co-pilot and their fellow cabin crew are thinking or going through in the same moment, along with the people like air traffic control, the cabin crew, passengers, dispatch, tracking, everyone that is going about their daily life trying to ensure that the plane makes it off the ground safely and into the skies safely and continue moving the ball down the field like they would just do on any ordinary day.
Yeah. I think definitely. And there's other examples, right? Like I think Germanwings flight 9525, for example. For all we know, by the way, right, there's a long history of aircraft crashes before the sort of widespread deployment of the black box or cockpit recorders or so on and so forth. For all we know, some chunk of those aircraft incidents were also caused by this. And I think that's one thing that when you think about kind of aviation safety in 2025, there's some very real things that have gotten discreetly worse across the last 5 years or the last 10 years, right? Whether that is air traffic control staffing and underinvestment in air traffic control infrastructure, whether that is pilot staffing and kind of this it's called strained relations and sort of working conditions that many pilots face. But there is also just an additional layer of information, right? Both information and I would say just as importantly, if not more importantly, misinformation as it relates to aircraft incidents and sort of aviation safety. And I think in the same ways that social media has really destabilized all aspects of life, from politics to culture to gender relations to pretty much anything you can think of, I also think that it has really meaningfully destabilized people's perceptions of aviation and airline safety, because in the past, right, yes, you obviously had sensationalism and news coverage, heavy news coverage around aircraft crashes, but that is distinct from tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people opining in real time without perfect or even any information about what happened, the causes of what happened, the ways in which and then you pair that with the ways in which the underlying algorithms that drive what actually shows up in people's feeds and in people's information diets is driven not necessarily by accuracy or correctness, but rather by what is most likely to draw in engagement. I think you have a sort of a recipe and a cocktail for people to overreact to lots and lots of things. Like, for the very first time, I had people asking me, hey, is it safe to fly out of Newark? And I'm like, I've been on 12 flights out of Newark since they announced that they needed to cut back on flights. Like, what are you talking about? Yes, of course it's safe to fly out of Newark. But like, people actually, I think, have had their brains sort of like earwormed, I guess, by the like a toxoplasma of misinformation is like too strong a word, right? And like, we've obviously spent a lot of time around people that actually are sort of like thoughtful, considered experts who very closely kind of analyze and reason about aviation safety. And that is not the default person's experience of reporting and news and information on aviation safety. It's some Twitter anon who posted a snarky tweet about like pilots with a certain background and got 700,000 chuds to like retweet it. And that's kind of their default experience of it.
Wow. Also, I have to say, I love your background. Are you in a hotel room or is that your apartment?
I'm in a hotel room. Yeah, well, you'll have to save my apartment view for maybe the next episode that we record.
I can't wait. Our first live episode. I'll probably come to New York in very soon.
Yeah,
good.
While there's not necessarily a structure to this podcast episode, I do want to say that one life update that I have had is that in the past year, I've started traveling a lot more for work. And so I have officially received my tags and United Premier Gold, baby.
Congratulations.
Oh, it's Tesla Oklahoma in Washington, D.C. on the CRJ 550. That gets you gold. So I guess I have kind of quasi dipped my toe back into the loyalty game, but this time it's less from an av geek / leisure perspective and more from a like truly business travel perspective. And my former employer, United Airlines, they are slaying the game and back on the drug. It's like United, I would describe, is like my relationship with Kesha. They're like,
that's an amazing
living. I mean, like, this is cool. Welcome to the club. American Airlines does not do that. Southwest does not do that. Delta has done it, and that's what United's.
Maybe Southwest will, now that they're, upping their numbers.
And that's why it's so good to be back, because there's so many things we're going to talk about. This is season 9, Vinay. We've been doing this.
Season 9, yeah. We definitely had the longest possible hiatus this time around. Mostly my fault. If I'll fall.
It kind of wrecked with it. Also, when I was in business school / when I was working for United in network planning, and
we definitely have had the most inconsistent of times.
But that's kind of how podcasts are.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that I wanted to mention that perhaps for our listeners that we could just for now mention that this will be an occasional, podcast. So it's not going to be like a weekly, a 2-weekly. It could be. So we have that
or like stories. They're just audible, visual nuggets.
Audible visual nuggets. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll work on the video version. I know.
And there's so many other podcasts. We know you have your choice of podcasts, and we thank you for listening to Airways. Yes. We just hide behind the Airways brand because, people actually do listen to our stuff.
Yeah. Rohan, not to not to respond to your wonderful news of finally reachieving United status with, an appendage measuring contest, but as of yesterday, I'm officially at 1K and executive platinum and whatever the second highest level of mosaic is and diamond medallion so far in calendar year 20.
Daddy,
I have also
you
been
Chicago degree. You got literally
I was
the
waiting
bang
for it.
of the
I was waiting for it.
And then on the hotel side, I have Marriott Ambassador and Airlines. And
Wow. See, I'm a one trick wonder. You are all over the spectrum.
Okay, I have flown 91 flights and 170,000 miles so far this calendar year. So,
hey man, I love it for you. And I love the way you look too. You look like you've been taking good care of yourself. I remember when we first recorded the episode in June 2016. Vinay was coming into Dallas and he said to me, real talk though, I have to make sure that you live close enough to an Equinox. And I was like, are you for real? Is Vinay that kind of like pretentious person that needs an Equinox? Ironically, and coincidentally, I actually happened to be a member of the Equinox in Highland Park or Uptown Dallas, whatever.
It was always your spiritual destiny. If we're being honest.
And other than this is now, I'm now LA Fitness, so we've come full circle here. But basically, Vinay's obsession with his, kind of healthy habits and needing to have that routine structure in there, I was like, mad respect. I got your back.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily pay off for a long time, but doing all right.
Hey, I got dumbbells.
Congratulations.
Yeah, 5 minutes a day. I'm not going crazy on that thing, but
that's definitely the pinnacle of
for me it is.
Fitness.
For me it is.
Yeah.
All right. So let's round up the Air India conversation and then let's go to Delta.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to mention that, it is the first fatal accident of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And so I know that's probably the lesser, it's not as important or critical to speak of. But there was a kind of controversy that I read where the preliminary findings had generated significant debate in the aviation community. Chris Smith mentioned for Airways and that the report didn't mention any type of information regarding the serviceability of engines, when the switches were changed or updated or maintained last. So that that is conducive to hearsay and rumor, right? So the report focuses on the fuel cutoff for sure. Well, according to the Wall Street Journal, early analysis of the cockpit voice recorder suggests that the first officer was flying the aircraft asked the captain why he had moved the fuel switches. Now, I don't think you could surmise this from the report, but the report did mention that the FAA conducted its own analysis of the fuel control systems and concluded that there was no evidence of mechanical failure or inadvertent switch movement. I don't know, but I guess that's what I'm trying to say, that people's consideration of the preliminary report is that it wasn't up to snuff. But then again, It's a preliminary, right? I mean, it takes a year, if not more, to actually know what happened.
I think this ties in with the point I was making about the velocity of information. People are used to getting information at their fingertips on demand, right? And the rise of sort of ChatGPT, which will make up something even if it doesn't have the information and give you an answer instantly, has only exacerbated that, right? And I think that like the challenge that you run into, right, is like precisely because of how complex and interconnected aviation is as a system, right? Truly determining and teasing out what actually caused an accident or an incident is something that takes a lot of time because it takes a really, really thorough, considered investigation. And people want answers and they want answers quickly. And that's at tension with actually finding what caused an accident or what caused an incident. And so that like tension, I think you're hitting on another aspect of this. Some of it is sort of the the speculation around the pilots and their state of health and their sort of mental health, right? State of mind and mental health, rather.
Yeah.
But some of it is just, hey, we haven't had enough time to like really uncover and unturn all the different and turn over rather all the different aspects of what went wrong here.
Yeah.
And you could eventually find that, hey, pilot action played a role or it didn't, that aircraft maintenance played a role or it didn't, that aircraft design played a role or it didn't, right? That all of those things are still very much within the universe of possibilities, right? Doctor Strange sitting there with the 4,000.
Yeah.
Right. The honest answer is we don't know, but everyone wants to know and they want to know now. And that there's something just like fundamental tension in there that you know, I don't think we reckon with properly.
Yeah, speaking of tension, I mean, like Kylie Minogue on the tension tour, she should be the spokesperson for Air India. Actually, jokes aside, I think people want to take away also in the aviation community, and we here, us esteemed people of the Airways podcast, the ripple effect is real, and the brand perception and reputation is real. It's crazy, as you mentioned, that Air India, you know, this takes time. I mentioned earlier the bombing of AI Flight 182, the one that went from Montreal to London to Delhi to Mumbai, that was bombed off the coast of Ireland by terrorist groups based out of Canada, radical separatists that wanted to perpetuate acts of terrorism against Hindu or Indian nationals. And the Indo-Canadian relations were already strained, and it's become a constant topic of strain that just is this very strange, bizarre triangle between Vancouver, Toronto, and the state of Punjab. And the arrests and the, process by which, you know, RCMP of Canada and India, it just became a whole thing, and it's still ongoing as a topic of discussion. Fast forward to what we're dealing with today, not in 1985, but 2025. You have Tata Group that is involved with Air India. Singapore Airlines, Vistara has been merged in. AirAsia India has been moved in. This Vihan AI concept that is all about the Jana Hindustan, let's go Air India, you know, we're going to make it happen, Maharaja on fleek. The really kind of jarring thing to me is that this is more than just Air India trying to get its groove back. This is more than Air India being this joke that people love to troll on social media, or in India where people, you know, like Air India is perceived as the spirit and frontier of India. And, you know, you have Campbell Wilson and you have the, you know, kind of conglomeration of different airlines and different leaders and leadership styles and cultures that are now becoming this massive Air India brand that has to work with Indian aviation and Indian airports and be the flag carrier of India and then Star Alliance. And I look at all of this and I'm like, it's bigger than all of that. This involves Boeing. This involves the 787. And how will Air India come back from this? How will they move forward from this? How will their leadership, who have been kind of trolled for handling this disaster in a way where they kind of co-opted Robert Isom's speech from American Airlines and used that script, it also exposes another thing about aviation that the common public doesn't know about, which is disaster response and recovery and what protocol are in place.
Yeah, I mean, aviation is probably the most demanding crisis response PR comms industry that exists, right? Short of like, you know, FEMA, right? Like they probably have the most aggressive kind of advanced protocols around that. I do think that what you're calling out is very, very real though. In that like Air India, yeah, and yes, there were fits and starts, and yes, there were plenty of YouTube review videos that called out the old school 777s and 787s that had, you know, a questionable product. But Air India had some real momentum and some real tailwinds, right? they were starting to move the needle and kind of change the brand perception. The aircraft orders helped with that. The fact that the combination of both new cabins, and I think we even talked about this on some of our past episodes, both on the standalone Air India jets and on some of the secondhand 777s that they acquired in from places like Etihad and Singapore, they had some real momentum and some real tailwinds. And now you take another look at it and, hey, these types of disasters, especially to the degree that the narrative takes hold that this was Air India caused and not Boeing caused or sort of like aircraft caused.
Engines,
right? And to the degree that that's kind of where the narrative settles, I could see this being like a real speed bump, right? I don't think that the long-term trajectory necessarily changes, right? Again, you go back long enough and Korean Air has a checkered history with aircraft safety, right? So time sort of heals all wounds, but, aircraft crashes have brought down airlines before, right? TW-96?
800.
TWA 800, which was in 1996, absolutely probably had a meaningful impact on their trajectory. The Value Jet crash destroyed the airline's brand name. Yeah. So there's some very, very real risk here. And the other piece to call out is that Indigo just is a all-consuming, non-stop kind of machine. It's now flying international.
You won't take my credit card because I'm trying to make a booking for an internal domestic flight in August, but that's a different discussion.
It's not a machine for
Navigator,
foreigners.
Help me out.
It's a machine for Indians in India.
Yes.
And so I think from that perspective, that's where I would say that, there's some real risk here. Now, I think it's too early to say that it's going to be a permanent scar or anything like that, but there's some real risk here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's bring it up a level. What about Tata Group and Singapore Airlines?
I think Singapore Airlines will be fine. They're currently in the midst of record profitability, and this is not core to their financials or to their balance sheet. I think for the Tata Group too, because there's not that much debt on the balance sheet, ultimately this is reasonable, and they're definitely losing less money than if they had just been Vistara by itself. So I think they'll be fine. But and the Tata Group is so diversified and so widespread across every possible sector of the Indian economy that even if Air India were to go belly up, I don't think it would meaningfully change their sort of trajectory, right? They're a national champion for India in the same way that like Samsung is a national champion. Even GE it's not quite the same valence, right? Because Samsung gets sort of like...
Well, Samsung to Korea, yes.
To Korea, yeah.
I
gets like favorable government sort of treatment and placement and market access. And something like that very much happens with the Tata Group.
And they're doing what they can, right? I mean, the Tata Group and Air India, they established a support system for the families, the affected families, compensation. I don't know if, it's so a memorial, I think, for welfare trust. So, I mean, what else can you do, right?
Right. We honor them. We honor the people that took the videos and TikToks and stuff. Like, the world has become av geeks. Do you all know that? People listen to this podcast because they like aviation. They like travel. It is the democratization of travel has created an allure and a means by which that people now have access to the world. And you see things like queer couples from England that are backpacking in India, taking their jolly flight back to the UK from Ahmedabad. This wasn't even the Air India flight from Toronto to Montreal to London was like a signature Air India route in 1985. Okay. We want to get av geeky with this. This Ahmedabad to London Gatwick flight, this is the Gatwick flight. This is like Air India doing point to point ish from like Ahmedabad and Cochin and Goa and Amritsar sometimes to Gatwick. When we had Abudi Nazar on here from Stansted Airport, I think in 2020 from pre-pandemic days, like Air India was flying to London Stansted. Like outside of India, Air India's most important and lucrative value prop have to be its slots and access to Heathrow first, JFK second, and San Francisco,
Yeah, but San Francisco isn't really slot controlled, right? Like, you know, you can get access to San Francisco.
No.
I mean,
Toronto, Vancouver, huge for them. And, it's had the ripple effect across the route map because geopolitical situation in India has caused also the westbound flights from Delhi to Toronto, Chicago, and DC, I believe, to have to go through Vienna for refueling. So if I had kept my original itinerary flying to Chicago to Delhi nonstop, I was doing it in the back of the bus in October, it would have been a 15-hour flight plus. Because when I took the United nonstop Chicago-Delhi flight that existed in 2022, one way, it was, I think, roughly the same length, barring the Russia overflight ban. On the return, though, United had to cull that route because it just was, especially in the winter, not economically nor operationally feasible for them to fly a 789 from Delhi to Chicago or San Francisco, avoiding Russian airspace. Well, it made more sense for them to just stick with Newark. They even added a second Newark frequency. That was too much. And now Air India, for all those years, had the monopoly on the Chicago-Delhi nonstop flight, even with the Russian airspace stuff. But because things are messy now between India and Pakistan and other countries, Air India is literally having to fly over the Gulf and then around and up through Mumbai to get to Delhi. It's like super weird. Air India in Delhi.
Well, I mean, I think there's a thematic shift, right, over the course of the 9 years that we've been doing this podcast, of geopolitics has returned with a vengeance to impact commercial air travel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Flashback to 2016, right? Like, I think we started the podcast before Brexit, if I'm not mistaken, and before the sort of election of Trump. And since that moment, the geopolitics of all kinds of stripes, obviously the conflict and war has impacted, most notably kind of with Russian overflight, Russia and Ukraine directly as air travel markets. The Middle East has seen tensions. India and Pakistan have seen tensions. Even beyond that, right? Like, U.S. trade policy has impacted air travel patterns and demand curves and things like that. Geopolitics has returned with a vengeance, and the sort of, like, let's say, never-ending trend towards one-way march towards more international interconnectivity, whether that's economic, travel, or otherwise, is definitely hit us at a speed bumps.
I think over the course of my life for today's episode, geopolitics has returned with a vengeance, and it's affected global travel.
Yeah, that's
the Global Tension Tour.
So just last sort of non sequitur thought on this. Last 5 minutes here. I know we're all, we've mostly covered kind of Air India today, but as we start to talk a little bit more about kind of airline routes and commercial, get back into kind of the commercial side of things. One thing I've been dying to talk to you guys about since we figured out that we were going to actually bring this back is Phoenix, right? Little old Phoenix Sky Harbor now has 2 trans-Pacific routes.
Phoenix is in New
Taipei.
But out of nowhere. And not just trans-Pacific routes, from Phoenix to Taipei, right? You have the sort of tag service from China Airlines paired with one of their LAX flights. And then you have Starlux flying, I believe, nonstop. And just what is my first reaction? Like, what's happening right now?
My theory is it's more than just semiconductors in Phoenix. It's truthfully China. China, because of what has become geopolitics, the absence of Chinese airlines and low-cost airlines flying to the North American region has created a nice little bump for the other East Asian countries, namely Japan, Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines even. Manila is hot, and even Hong Kong to a lesser degree. Like Cathay Pacific is like going at it. And you're seeing airlines like United, adding a lot of Asia Pacific capacity that is not China oriented. You're seeing Japan Airlines and All Nippon like doubling down on both Narita and Haneda. Korean Air for Seoul. And then of course the Taipei is so hot right now. And you have 3 airlines. I mean, the consolidation of 2 airlines in South Korea has taken like the longest time ever between Asiana and Korean Air, but it's happening. Japan, I think they'll remain separate. But in Taipei, you still have the duking it out between EVA and China Airlines, and now you got Starlux.
Starlux is sort of birthed from the fruit of the poison tree, right? Like the Starlux founder was originally at EVA, sorry. Is I believe the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, EVA.
I learned in a YouTube video. EVA is, I believe, how they want to be referred to themselves. Yeah. But I do think that the sort of like the Taipei to Phoenix route, I think, is a little distinct in that your point about, hey, in general, we're seeing a lot more trans-Pacific flying that's not touching China, in part because the Chinese carriers are not in a bunch of American cities offering deeply discounted fares to connect all over Asia. So I'm sure that plays a role in how lucrative trans-Pacific service is. The U.S. carriers also are turning increasingly to East Asia as the transatlantic market has become saturated, as Latin America has become reasonably saturated, right? Especially because part of what drives it, right, more broadly, and this is why, United has gone gangbusters across the Pacific, why Delta, just announced the addition of LAX to Hong Kong, is because transatlantic is so hot in kind of the northern summer, you need places to fly the planes to park them essentially in the winter. And there's only so much Latin America you can do before you're, trying to figure out how to land a 767 at Cusco, right? So on some level, I think that has played a role in the general kind of boom and resurgence of trans-Pacific travel. I think Instagram, to be honest, has probably played a role because, in our kind of post-pandemic leisure travel world, Asia is definitely more sort of Instagram friendly and less played out than Rome.
What about
it's a more fun destination for the girlies, as it were.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
but what about,
and to be clear, by girlies, that is non-gendered. Rohan and I are also girlies. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, Helwing.
Yeah, but what about the high value cargo? I mean, because it's true. How much cargo can you send South America as opposed to right now with all these big investments in semiconductors and
Yeah, I think cargo is a big driver, right? And I'm sure Phoenix Airport ponied up because they've long coveted trans-Pacific service. I think for a long time they were trying to work on the sort of American JAL Tokyo nexus.
Yeah.
And it didn't work, in part because I think American Airlines doesn't really have an Asia strategy if you sort of squint at it, right?
I'm actually gonna not challenge you, yes, and you halfway. Shout out to, I think, our Gorleys at Dots, Lines, and Destinations, DLD. That's Seth Miller, Steven Seagraves, and Faz Mahmood. They were talking about how in this whole Delta Hong Kong situation, truth of the matter is American actually has more dots in Asia, East Asia, than Delta does. And it's wild to me.
Is that true?
Apparently.
Are they including the South Pacific? Because obviously American...
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Just
all right, we're keep going. I'm going to fact check this. Give me a second.
I could be wrong. They said there's something about that in the recent episode. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, Delta has... My gosh, they inherited that Northwest Airlines Asia Pacific assets. And Vinay, you and I still have to do a deep dive podcast that we'll do on Northwest Airlines someday. Northwest Airlines was largely an international airline, a United, essentially, up until the 80s. When it then became merged with Republic, that's when they got the domestic hubs of Memphis and Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Detroit, which then was able to feed into the Asia network and beyond in Europe in the JV with KLM. And then you had all of these dots, lines, destinations that Northwest brought to the table for Delta, not just from the Midwest, but also even from the West Coast and from Hawaii and from New York and others, that has really just been kind of filtered down. Delta doesn't, they still have some Detroit linkages, but they haven't flown, they canned Manila. They're doing stuff out of Seattle, and I'm sure that that's, kind of where they're going to put their eggs for whatever. But now they have to try to make a comeback in LA. They have to make a play in LA because United has been United has been very like, not only do we got San Francisco, which is the trans-Pacific gem of the world, but we can also do LA, like despite an EWR and ORD like inability to fly to the Asia Pacific because of the Russia situation.
I see an episode or a series of episodes with just history, linking the past or history with even with the future.
I think that would be a lot of fun, just to close the needle on the fact check.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that's like technically true, but in practice not really true. So here's kind of the full list, right? So both airlines fly to Pudong. Both airlines fly to Incheon, so Shanghai and Seoul. Both airlines fly to Haneda. Because American splits its Tokyo operation across Haneda and Narita, for the moment, American has more destinations. Sorry, Delta has more. American has more destinations in East Asia than Delta does. Now, the other thing that they could be including is India, right? Because obviously American has their JFK to Delhi flight.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't really consider that East Asia. It's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah. They also have the New York Haneda flight that's relatively new. And JAL has recently re-added Chicago to Narita. So, like, American kind of, like, gets away with it.
And sorry, Delta also goes to Taipei. So now I'm really, really confused as to where this data...
Maybe I'm misspeaking. We'll ask the Gorleys for...
Okay, yeah. So, sorry, they must be including Delhi because Delta also goes to Taipei. Right?
Yeah.
I forgot about that bloodbath of a
sea. It's really interesting. Sometimes it's categorized in the transatlantic category. Sometimes it's not. Like, I mean, and I think that largely has to do with JVs and JV purposes. Like, when I worked at United, for example, Mumbai, Delhi were considered Atlantic, not trans-Pacific. I'm sure that had a lot to do with, like, the A+ with Air Canada and United and Lufthansa. That's all public information. Anything I share here is public. So I think that actually might be a nice little segue into the Delta 787 order. And I think that one of the longest running topics on airliners.net, shout out to our Gorleys at airliners.net, original TikTok and Instagram of the world where all of the rabbits gather to dish out the latest tea. Yeah, for the longest time, there was that thread on when will Delta add LAX to ORD? Well, it's happening. When will Delta finally admit that it regrets canceling Northwest Airlines 787 order? Well, it's happening. Northwest Airlines was actually going to be the launch operator of the 787 in the US, I believe. I'm not sure in the world. That might still have gone to All Nippon. And fun fact, I flew on the All Nippon 787-8 before the battery situation from Seattle to Narita. That was a trip going to Manila. All roads lead to Manila. So the trending topic that will never die is Delta 787s. And humor me for a second. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, Delta had one commonality of a fleet type with Northwest when they merged, which was the 757. So adding another family into the fleet, pretty rough. We also know that the 787-8 is kind of like the 767-200 in the sense that it is the first iteration of that aircraft. The real hump comes from the -9 and the -10 iteration, whether it's by cargo, freight, or by passenger, or both, or distance, or range, or cabin, cockpit layout, whatever. So the -8s that Delta may have potentially gotten would have been designed for all kinds of plausible routes that we can talk about in our hypothetical episode, Vinay and Helwing. The question I have is, the rumor is back about Delta, and so what's it going to be? If it's not the 8s, is it going to be the 9s? Will it include the 10s? Candidly speaking, I know that Delta is going to get A350-1000s that will complement its A350-900 fleet. So from a capacity and cargo and even range perspective, they have that part down. What exactly will the 787 bring to the fleet that Delta needs? And I think that that is where Boeing comes into the picture, because not only did Delta retire all of its Boeing 777 aircraft right around the pandemic and took those frames out, but also Delta relies
767.
heavily. Yes.
That makes sense.
Telling how Helwing, you're onto something. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like they're expected to start the 767 300 yards, that retirement, right? Before the end of the decade. So
Yeah.
I think they're gearing up for that.
It's a pilot thing too. It's a demand thing, and it's a skills and certification thing. I mean, like 767 and 757 aircraft are old and expensive to maintain and to train and to operate. The Delta 787 rumor is so fascinating to me because there was the cancellation of Northwest's order. There has been the continuation of using 767s and 757s, which are common fleet type for a lot of Delta's international, I don't want to say long haul, but kind of long haul, wide body, transatlantic capacity, trans-Pacific capacity that they're doing right now without 777s. And then the third most point is Delta has A350s, including 900s and 1000s that are on order. So how does the 787 come into the picture for Delta? And with, as we know, a canceled 8 means 9, I'm listening, 10, you have my attention.
I actually think that they're more likely to take advantage of and benefit from the 9 versus the 10. I mean, the 10 is a really, 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 really efficient aircraft, right? It is the most efficient way to carry 300 to 330 passengers up to 6,000 miles, right, on a wide body route. But I think the 9 is really the hole in Delta's fleet, right? Because the A330-900 is their sort of like 240 to 280 seat solution, and it doesn't have the range to meaningfully open up longer and thinner destinations, right? Whereas, here's the thing, the 8 is the ugly redheaded stepchild, but it's also a 220 seat wide body with the ability to fly up to 7,000 miles or up to 8,000 miles in certain cases. And that is a useful function at a place for both American and United, frankly, right? It allows them to fly routes that Delta cannot, right? Delta tries a lot of stuff over the Pacific, over the Atlantic that they cannot over the Pacific or even into South America when you take some of the hot and high characteristics into consideration. So I don't think airlines are ordering the 8 these days, right? In part because the 9 has basically the same trip costs at lower sort of seat mile costs. But the 8s, when depreciated, once you've bought them, they're a great tool. You just wouldn't make the decision to buy them on paper now in 2025. But I think actually the 9 is where Delta is going, because the A350-900 and the 330-900neo do a more than excellent job of fulfilling transatlantic and South American flying. The 9 is the hole in Delta's fleet. And then separately, to the degree that they're embedded entirely within the Airbus ecosystem, you do lose some pricing power. Now, for all we know, this is just a ploy to get Airbus to bring the price point down on more 350s or more 330-900s. But I do actually think that the 787-9, an aircraft that can fly San Francisco to Singapore nonstop or any route of that length nonstop, is a useful tool that Delta doesn't really have access to, right? The A350-900 is 30 to 40 seats larger than 787-9, and that difference changes the types of markets that you can try. And there are a lot of markets, by the way. A lot of those South Pacific markets, I think, would do better for Delta on a 787-9 because there's enough competition and they're sort of long and thin enough that you are better off with a 787. And Delta is a large enough airline that it can comfortably operate the 787 and the A350 side by side. So on that note, it has been an absolute pleasure to record with you guys for the first time in 9 months.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, just one question. When you travel, since you travel a lot internationally, how do you deal with phone bill? Like, do you have an eSIM and do you exchange, like, what kind of service do you
use Airalo, and, we're not sponsored, and they do a pretty good job with the eSIMs, right? I've been able to get an eSIM pretty much everywhere in the world that I go. So that of my travel is also domestic. I'm in DC.
Okay. I was there in June last month for World Pride.
Well, I think then it's good to hear from our new sponsors, Saily, from NordVPN. They have this new product that we want to.
We are sponsored.
Yeah.
Why would you let me go through the whole Airalo thing? Well, now I got to switch to Saily. Like, okay,
well,
that's.
I think it's the perfect opportunity to do so. So we'll hear from them, and we'll be right
sponsored. Back. I'm so thrilled. We're sliving. We're absolutely sliving.
Today's episode is brought to you by Saily, smart travel solution for affordable international data. Saily offers eSIM data plans for over 200 destinations worldwide. What makes Saily special? Well, you get one eSIM that works everywhere. No need to swap cards or buy new eSIMs for each country. Here's what we love about Saily. Instant connection. Your plan activates automatically when you land. 24/7 chat support. Smart alerts. Get notified when you use 80% of your data so you can top up easily. And money saving. Ditch those expensive roaming fees for good. Right now, Saily has a special summer deal just for Airways podcast listeners. Use code AirwaysMag5 and get 5% off your first purchase. Plus, earn up to 5% back in Saily credit on all future plans. Check out the link in our show notes below to get started with Saily. And don't forget to use code AirwaysMag5 for 5% off your first purchase. That's AirwaysMag, the number 5, for 5% off your first purchase.
We're on brand. We are those girlies, social media, having fun, talking about airlines. We're celebrities, and we're honest. And
so I'm gonna tell them to send us a few of those, or I don't know what kind of how that works. This is like so, and then you can try it out and see the difference. And
okay, all right. Well, I'll have to report back on the differences between Airalo and Saily. Okay, yeah,
I think so. That's a great area.
Podcast literally started out of a hotel room in Dallas, Texas in June 2016. Has had iterations with Chris Sloan and Enrique Perella, and has gone through Venezuela, India, to Farnborough in the UK, to Malaysia, to South Africa, to the Middle East, to Chicago.
Where are you based now, Vinay?
I live in New York.
Now we're in New York. Un verano en Nueva York.
In Nueva York. So we're like, okay, good. Because last time we recorded, I was in Florida. Now I'm in New York as well.
Last time I was in Dallas. So yeah,
exactly.
By Bad Bunny
and Chicago.
All
right, guys. Well. It's been great.
I love y'all.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. I did not realize how much I missed having this in my life.
Yes, and our hearts and thoughts go out to the families, relatives, anyone impacted by AI 171.
Yes,
and other aviation tragedies that have happened in 2025. We do want to acknowledge that the one phoenix from the ashes that rises from aviation disasters, crises, is that new information and new data equals new knowledge and better preparedness and awareness and readiness to help us all come back to care. And so check in. I did a meditation tonight. Helped me a lot. I love my dog. I love my fitness. I love my music. But just breathing sometimes, doing something internally, and spreading that love from human to human. That's why we believe in the skies and soaring. So coming back to that notion, yeah, this is all a letter of love. It's so enriching. It's a passion project. Vinay and I just kind of found. Helwing, you're part of our circle too. Yeah. Next recording live will probably be in New York, and the next episode, well, like Dr. Dre says,
And the TWA Hotel.
At the TWA Hotel. That seems apropos.
Yeah.
Can people subscribe to the podcast the same places they always could subscribe to the podcast? Yes. Apple Music, Spotify.
Yes. In all the channels, all the platforms, we are back online, guys. So thank you, everyone. Thank you all our listeners and subscribers. It's great to be back with Vinay and Rohan.
And I can start maybe even DJing for us because, hey, my Latin American side is essentially Puerto Rican, and in the spirit of energy, a little Bad Bunny as our closing outro.
Wait, are you trying to get us copyright struck in our first episode back? Like, what's happening right now? Plays the royalty-free music or a silent DJ. Perfect. Yep, there it is.
Yes.
That's the move.
We do have a producer. All right, guys. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful chat. We'll see you in the next episode of the Airways podcast.